So there are different media of sampling. Not only rock is only media from which you can collect the geological sample. Other media are also there which can be used for the collection of sample and for the analysis of different elemental and oxide analysis, and we can use those medias for the investigation or mineral exploration. So what are the different medias for sampling? The first and foremost is stream sediment. Now, stream sediment, the stream sediments are the sediments which can be seen in the flowing stream or generally such stream sediment samples is being collected for investigation for a larger area, and generally this the sort of sample media is generally used for geochemical sampling. Okay, and the most important part for this type of sampling is that we always collect the naturally occurring size fraction. After collection of stream sediment, we never powder them, we never resize them. Okay, only we collect whatever the naturally occurring fraction is there, generally minus 80 to minus 120, and sometimes minus 200 fractions are also used for the collection of stream sediment sample. And after collection of those fractions, we directly go for the chemical analysis for different elements. So stream sediment is a media which can be used for rapid evaluation of a large area, and it is a cost effective because by collecting one sample from 1 square kilometer or 2 square kilometer area, you can have an idea, or you can have a chemical property of that larger area. Okay, sir, थोड़ा बात करिए. Okay, then rock media, you all know rock media. Ingest some of the metals. So if you can collect the vegetation sample and analyze them, you can get some anomaly, and from that anomaly you can have an idea what type of metals or what type of commodity you are going to get in your area. So these are the sampling medias. But most rigorously used or most commonly used sample medias are rock media, then water media, and soil, because soils samples are generally collected where you will not get any rock exposure, and generally soil samples are being collected from in situ soil, and you all know that soil has different horizon, A horizon, B horizon, and C horizon. So we always try to collect samples from C horizon, that is horizon which is nearer to the bedrock surface. Okay, so these are the different sampling medias, and nowadays we by using some advanced machines, we can also collect that gas and vapor sample. Okay, and this type of the sampling media is generally used, such as soil, gas, vapor. These media is generally where rock exposure is very scanty. That means the area is totally covered by recent alluvium. Okay. Now, if we talk about the objective, why we have to collect the samples? The type of sampling depends on the objective of the surface exploration program. That means what type of surface exploration you are carrying out, depending upon we will select the sample media and type of sample. Okay, if you are doing regional exploration, then you definitely will select the sample media as stream sediment. Okay, So if you are doing detailed exploration in a G2 stage or G3 stage, definitely you will use the rock media as a sampling media. So depending upon the surface exploration program and stages of exploration, our type of sampling will depend. The aim of the surface sampling or actually prospecting or exploration is to successfully reduce the target area. And generally, what we do actually, when we approach for mineral exploration, initially we select a larger area. In the larger area, we collect some samples from stream sediment or soil or from water. Then if we get any anomaly, then we successfully reduce our target area by pointing out those particular anomalies. Okay, so definitely our aim of mineral exploration is to successfully reduce our target area, and finally we select a very smaller area for the further detailed exploration by drilling. Okay, so sampling media of different media such as stream sediment, rock, water, vegetation, soil, gas, vapor has been carried out during these different stages of mineral exploration. Okay, generally sampling generally reveals the pattern and limit of mineralization present in the area. So what does this pattern and limit means? Pattern means the way your mineralization is occurring in your area. Maybe sometimes your mineralization is bedded in nature. Sometimes it may be a natural pattern. It is occurring as a natural pattern. Sometimes it is occurring as a pinching, soiling nature. So what are the nature of the mineralization? That nature can be revealed by collection after collection of the sample and after getting the analysis. And limit up to which the mineralization is there. So these things can be defined by sampling only. Okay, because by only seeing the rock you cannot always understand that your mineralization is occurring up to this much. Okay, that's why sampling is very important. So thus it helps us to target the potential zones of mineralization in an area for further exploration. Okay, so after doing the sampling, we can define our area for the further exploration. Definitely successively when we do the sampling in different stage, their spacing gradually reduces. In initial stages, if you do the exploration and G4 stages, your sample spacing, that means space between each and every sample will be large. Whenever you gradually proceed from the higher stage to lower stage, that means the G4 to G2 stage or G1 stage, the spacing of the sample will gradually decrease, and more detailing about the ore body or about your area will be revealed by the collection of the sample. Okay. Suppose this is the example I have shown that in an area I have collected the stream sediment samples from different streams available in the area, and after getting analysis, I have plotted that analysis in each and every sample location, and and I have taken the commodity molybdenum for this study. I can see that few areas, few samples are giving the anomalous value. Definitely this part, this black shell part, we are getting 10 ppm, then 8 ppm, and this granodioritic part we are getting 12 ppm and 30 ppm. In other parts, the analysis are not so encouraging. So definitely by seeing this map, my first and foremost task is to go to the target the black shell and the granodiorite, because these two black shell and granodiorite is giving the anomalous value. Okay, again I have shown you some geochemical contour map. See these three geochemical contour map. First one is geochemical contour map for copper, second one is the geochemical contour map for lead, and third one is the geochemical contour map for zinc. Okay, and these contour maps has been prepared by collecting soil samples for lead and zinc in Dariba area. Okay, and we have collected so many samples. We have collected 224 number of soil samples, and we have analyzed those soil samples for different elements. And we have taken these three elements because the Dariba area of Rajasthan is very famous for lead zinc mineralization. So we have prepared geochemical contour map for copper to see the concentration, where the concentration is copper is higher. And we have also prepared geochemical contour map for lead and geochemical contour map for zinc. And by seeing this map, we can understand and we can pinpoint the areas where there is a potential to get these elements is more. You can see for this copper contour map, in the northern portion there is 2 peaks coming, and in southwestern portion 2 peaks are coming. So definitely these 2 peaks are anomalous zones, and we definitely going to target these zones for further exploration. And definitely in second map, you can see in the northern part only one area is there which is giving some anomalous value, but in southwestern part some two larger areas has been depicted by the geochemical contour map, from which we can easily identify the area and we can target for the lead mineralization. And for zinc also, as you see, lead and zinc will always occur together. Okay, that's why wherever you are getting anomaly for lead, you are also getting the anomaly for zinc, because of their chemical affinity or chemical properties, they always occur together in nature. Okay. Now coming to the type of sampling. Now I have discussed about the sampling media. Now let's talk about the type of sampling. What are the different type of samples we generally collect during the mineral exploration program or different mineral exploration programs? Okay. So that mineral exploration program may be for red deposit, maybe for metallic inclined ore body. Okay. For whatever the community you are doing exploration, these different type of sampling you have to always collect. Okay. Now these are the different type of samples we need to collect during any exploration program, starting from G4 stage of investigation to G1 stage. Okay. Generally, as I told you earlier, G1 stage is the regional exploration stage, or it is also called as reconnaissance stage. After that, we are getting the G3 stage, which is called prospecting stage, and after that, we are getting G2 stage, which is called the general exploration stage, and finally G1 is the detailed exploration stage. Actually, as per the UNIFC, there is three different axes. One is called G axis, another is called E axis, another is called F axis, and these three different axes are used for finally to know that whether your ore body is economically viable or not. Okay. Okay. Let me show you. See, these are the three different axes of UNFC, and this is G axis, this is E axis, suppose, and this is F axis. Okay, and now this G axis is further subdivided into three different stages: G4, G3, G2, and G1. This is your G4. This is second one is G3. Third one is your G2, and last one is G1. And this is the most important axis, because depending upon this geological axis, other the valuation of other axes is generally done. If you don't do any work on geological axis, there is no use of the other two axes. Okay, so whatever your stage of exploration may be, these are the different type of samples you have to collect. So first one is your bedrock sample, then rock chip sample or bedrock sample, then graph sample, then channel sample, pitting trenching sample, core sample, petrological sample. Then we sometimes collect sample for ore microscopic study, then sample for isotopic study. Sulfur isotope, oxygen isotope, fluorine isotope, chlorine isotope. There are different isotopes are there. And isotopic study is generally carried out to know the source of those sulfurs or source of those metals. Okay, that's why isotopic study. Generally, the isotopic study is then done in much higher stages. In lower stages, that is in G4 stage, we never do the isotopic study. But it is also very important. Okay, then we collect samples for fluid inclusion study. And fluid inclusion study is very important for metallic deposits, because all the metallic deposit has been formed from some hydrothermal solutions. And I don't know you have idea, not all the hydrothermal solutions or all the metals generally come from any magmatic source. From a magma, when the magma emplaces and it loses pressure and temperature and depth, some aqueous phases will exalt from the magma, and magmatic hydrothermal solution will form. In that magmatic hydrothermal solution, metals will be there, and those magmatic solution will mix with the other solution available in the geological environment. Other solution is mostly the water. It will mix with the water, and that evolved solution is known as hydrothermal solution. And for any metallic deposit, the hydrothermal solution is the responsible for the deposition of the metals and metallic deposits. So to know the source of that metals, sometimes fluid inclusion study is very important, because those within the crystal structure of the minerals, sometimes those initial fluids will be arrested during the crystallization process, and it will become a closed system. Whenever it will become a closed system, it will records the original pressure and temperature and salinity. That is the original environment of it, to know the source of the metal and to know the original environment of deposition or source of the metal. That fluid equation study is very important. Okay. After that, we have to collect some bulk sampling. Bulk sampling is generally carried out for the beneficiation study. Beneficiation study means you have did exploration for some commodity and you have proved some deposit. So from the deposit, whatever the commodity is there, that commodity can be extracted or not. To know that, we have to carry out some test, which is called beneficiation study or beneficiation test. For the beneficiation test, we need to collect a very huge amount of sample, 100 kg to 200 kg sample is required. So that's why it is called bulk sampling. That bulk sampling is generally carried out after the exploration by subsurface drilling. Okay, so these are the different type of samples we have to collect during the exploration. Now coming to the bedrock sample, I think all of you heard about the bedrock sample. We have very loose idea about the bedrock sample. We go to field and we collect few rock chips or rock samples from the exposed bedrock and we collect it as a bedrock sample. But bedrock sample has some specific procedure of collection. If you don't follow the specific procedure of collection, then it will not give you a representative sample, or it will not give you a representative value. So for the collection of bedrock sample, we have to first go to the field, and if you get any exposed bedrock, you have to clean the bedrock surface, and you have to select an area, and that area should be a circular area or a rectangular area or a triangular area. Whatever you want to select, you have to select an area. Suppose after going to the field, if we get a exposed bedrock, we clean the bedrock surface so that if there is some other material is lying on the bedrock surface, that should be mixed with our bedrock sample. So this is done to reduce the contamination. Okay, after that, we have to select an area of a circle with a radius of 1 meter or 1.5 meter radius area we have to select, and in this 1.5 or 1 meter radius circular area, we have to continuously chip the rocks within that particular circular area. See, this is a circular area on the exposed bedrock surface. This circular area has been selected, and in the circular area, after selecting the circular area, we have to chip the rock samples. Whatever the rock is there, we have to use our geological hammer, we have to use our chisel, and by using the geological hammer and chisel, we have to continuously do the chipping. After doing the continuous chipping, different sizes and the rock samples will be produced with different size and shape. Now we have to resize them. We have to resize them, and we have to roughly convert them into equal shape and sized samples or chips. After that, we have to collect the samples from whole area. Okay, and we have to make it 1.5 to 2 kg of sample. So that is called bedrock sample. Okay, so after the collection of that 1.5 kg or 2 kg sample from the circular area with equal size and shaped material chip, we have to properly label it. We have to record the latitude and longitude from where we have collected the bedrock sample, because if you don't have the location, it is of no use. Okay, that's why before collection of bedrock sample, you have to collect the you have to note down your location from where, that is GPS location from where you have collected the sample. Then you have to give a sample number, because during a geological study you are going to collect a number of samples. Okay, so likewise we have to collect the sample, and we have to then definitely after collecting a sample, you're not going to submit whole 1.5 kg or 2 kg sample to the chemical laboratory for analysis. You have to only submit 200 to 300 gram of sample for chemical analysis. For that, what you have to do, we have to powder those 1.5 kg or 2 kg sample. After powdering, you have to do the coning and quartering method for reducing the sample. Okay, I'll discuss what is coning quartering method in the later stage of this presentation. By applying coning quartering method, you will finally select one representative sample, and that representative sample will be submitted to chemical laboratory for analysis. Okay, so this is about the bedrock sample. Now, grid bedrock sample. the process of bedrock sample, what I have defined, if that sample is collected in a grid pattern, that is called grid bedrock sample. Suppose this is a area, block A is your area. Now you have to grid the area. You have to draw, you have to first define the grid interval, then you have to draw north-south lines and east-west lines. The intersection points are the sample locations for the grid bedrock sample. Generally, this type of grid bedrock sample is generally carried out during the detailed exploration stage. Whenever we do the detailed geological mapping on 1:1000 or 2000 scale for different commodity, sometimes for 1:5000 scale, 1:5000 scale, then we grid our whole area, and the intersection point of the grid is our sample location, and we collect the samples, we collect the bedrock samples. Okay, so why we collect the grid bedrock sample? Actually, any sort of mineral exploration is done in an integrated manner. That means we have to integrate the data from geological, geophysical, and geochemical discipline, or geochemical. We have to integrate the data collected in these three disciplines. Only relying on geological data, you cannot go for further exploration. Okay, side by side, you have to collect the data in geochemical stream, you have to collect data in geophysical stream, and then you have to integrate those data, and you have to finalize your target area. So to know the geochemical distribution, to know the distribution elements in your particular area, you have to collect grid bedrock sample, and you have to prepare one geochemical contour map for a particular area. Okay, that's why grid bedrock sample is being collected. After collection of grid bedrock sample, you collect the geochemical contour map, then we have the geological map, and then we have the geophysical map. Then we generally overlap these three maps, and we find out our most potential area. Okay, so that's why grid bedrock sample is need to be collected. Okay, so first gridding of the given area will be done with the given grid interval. Grid interval will again depend upon your commodity, or sometimes depending upon the amount of exposures you are getting in your area. Okay, sometimes gridding may be done 100 meter by 50 meter interval, sometimes 50 meter by 20 meter interval, and sometimes 50 meter by 10 meter interval. And that interval will again depend upon the your type of exposure you are getting. Okay. So these are few photographs showing the how they meticulously they are collecting the samples. Now this is an example. I am giving you the example. So this is an area, a detailed geological map, which is done by Geological Survey of India. In this geological map, we have collected some grid bedrock sample. You can see. So this portion is calc biotite gneiss, this greenish portion, and this portion is calc amphibole gneiss, and this portion is soil cover. So we didn't collect any sample from soil covered area. We have collected samples from the rock exposures, and we have collected samples in grid pattern. Okay. Now after collecting, and the grid interval is 50 meter by 10 meter. Okay. So after collecting this grid pattern sampling, we have carried out some chemical analysis for copper and other elements of base metals, and we have prepared one geochemical contour map for copper. So now see the map. We have prepared one geochemical contour map for copper, and you can see in northern portion one area is there where very higher copper value is there. In other portion the copper value is not that high. Okay, so you can see. So with the help of this geochemical map, you can pinpoint, or you can have an idea that if we go for further exploration, we should target this area. That's why this sort of map is very important. Or you can say, if we want to plan any borehole, to know the subsurface continuity of that surface mineralization, your borehole should first planned in this particular area. So that's why this sort of geochemical contour map is very, very useful for mineral exploration. And see our result. After doing this geochemical contour map, after doing this sampling, we have identified 130 meter wide copper mineralized zone, which have 300 meter strike length in north-south direction. And the copper value was varying from 30 ppm to up to 1.26 meter, 1.26%. Okay. So after plotting, this much of mineralization zone has been identified. That this type of map is sometimes very important. Okay. Again, in case of NGCM also, we collect stream sediment sample, and with the help of those stream sediment analytical data, we can plot those data, and we can prepare a very good geochemical contour maps in terms of different elements. Okay, so again, I have shown you this left hand side one is a geological map of an area that is 45K proportion number and degree sheet number, and in this right hand side one is a geochemical contour map of that whole degree sheet in respect of copper. Now you can see regionally you will have a picture for the copper occurrence in this area. So you can see this Dariba area is giving some anomalous value. This Shahpur area is giving some anomalous value. So if you want to select your target area for further mineral exploration, definitely you will select these two areas. So that's why this sort of map is very important for the mineral investigation. Now, another type of sampling is called gap sampling. People have misconception with gap sampling and bedrock sampling. Whatever the things I have defined, in that manner only bedrock sampling is being collected. But gap sampling has a totally different objective. Generally, when there is a mining activity is going on, sometimes some blasts to know the chemical property or to know the actual concentration of that particular element, that particular blast phase, we used to collect the gap sample, and we used to dump the mined material, and to know the grade of that mined material, we have to collect the sample from mined dump material. So those type of samples are called gap samples, because we are collecting samples from that particular blast phase or ore dump or mining dump. Okay, in a very random manner we collect the sample. There is not a regular interval or such type of things are not being followed in case of collecting the gap sample. Okay, but you have to taken care of the quantity, how much quantity you are collecting, and that quantity should be in proportion with the total blasted material or the dumped material. Okay, so after collection, it is processed and sent to laboratory for the chemical analysis. So this is a gap sample. Then another type of sample is called channel sample. This is a very important type of sample. Generally, this type of channel sample is being carried out for metallic deposits. Because in case of bedded deposit, you cannot put a channel. Why? Because our purpose of collection of channel sample is that we always try to see the variation of the chemical, variation of the grades in width of the mineralized zone. But in case of bedded deposit, the width is not exposed. Only if you get any vertical section, in that vertical section, you can get the width or thickness of the bedded deposit. There you can put a channel if you can have a vertical section. Generally, for an ore body which is a dipping in nature, for such ore body to know the variation of any particular element or particular commodity across the strike or across the width of the ore body, we have to collect the channel sample. So this is the channel sample, and generally channel is being excavated perpendicular to the strike of the ore body. So these channels are excavated generally at a 200 or 300 meter interval, depending upon the commodity in which we are doing the exploration. So these are the channels. So this red one is the ore body, and in a 200 meter or 300 meter interval, we can put a number of channels. Now there is a particular process or process of putting a channel. Generally, we have to excavate, we have to define the boundary of the channel, and width of the channel should be 5 centimeter or 10 centimeter, and depth should be 5 centimeter or which should be equal to the width of the channel. Okay, depth of the channel will be equal to the width of the channel. Then we do continuously we do the channel sampling, and generally at a 1 meter interval we collect the sample, and from the 1 meter length, see, I have shown you in the channel number 1, I have shown you the from 1 meter length, whatever the material you will get, all the material need to be collected, and collected material need to be processed and need to be analyzed. Okay. Likewise, in a channel, depending upon the length of the channel, number of channel samples will be decided. If the length of the ore body will be, or width of the ore body is 10 meter, your channel length should be 12 meter, and you have to collect 12 number of channel samples. Okay, for each and every channels. Now, if your ore body is not a regular ore body, sometimes suppose your ore body is pinching, swelling, somewhere it is giving larger width, somewhere it is giving smaller width. So at different width, you will get the different number of samples. Yes. Yes, Vikas, are you saying something? Vikas Kumar. No. Okay. So these are the channel samples. After collection of the samples, you have to process the sample like in bedrock sample and git bedrock sample, and you have to submit it to the chemical laboratory for the analysis. Okay. I have defined you. This is the this is the photograph showing the channel. See, this is the channel which has been cut across the width of the across the strike of the ore body. Now, after getting the analysis, because channel sampling is a continuous sampling, okay, because continuously you are getting sampling and you have analyzed each and every sample. So after getting the analysis of a channel sample, you can prepare one beautiful geochemical profile, and you can see the variation of a particular element along that particular channel. So I have plotted the this geochemical profile for copper. You can see I have collected 25 number of channel samples. That means the length of our channel was 25 meter, and see how this copper value is varying. Initially, copper value was very less. In the middle portion, it has gone up to 0.9%, and again it's go down. So across the strike or along the width of the ore body, how the element is elemental concentration is varying, that you can have an idea with the by plotting of this channel sample data. Okay. Then pitting and trenching. Pitting and trenching, the word itself indicate some pits has to be excavated, and trenching means some two-dimensional, that means some width and length will be there for trench. Then why we should excavate pit and trench? Sometimes we get some anomalous value in soil sample. So from where this anomaly is coming, to know that we have to excavate some pit and we have to go up to the bedrock. And generally the general dimension of the pit will be 1 meter by 1 meter, and it will be excavated up to the bedrock surface if feasible. Okay, if you can expose the bedrock surface by doing the pitting, you have to collect the rock sample from the bedrock, and after getting analysis, we can understand from where the anomaly is coming in the soil sample. Okay, so generally 5 centimeter wide and 3 centimeter deep slot or channel generally excavated in the base of the pit for the collection purpose. Then coming to the trench sample. Trench is generally excavated when there is a discontinuous ore body is exposed on the surface. Suppose on the surface your ore body is not continuous body. At places it is covered by dune, it is covered by the alluvium. Then to know whether your ore body is continuing or not, then in the discontinuous part we have to excavate some trench, and the direction of the trench will be always perpendicular to the direction of the ore body. That means the direction of the trench will be always perpendicular to the strike of the ore body. Okay, to know whether your ore body is continuing in between areas or not, we have to excavate the trench. Generally, dimension of the trench will be dimension of the trench, that is length of the trench will be always depend upon the width of the ore body. If your ore body is 10 meter of width, your trench should be 11 or 12 meter of length, and depth will be up to 2 meter, because after 2 meter it is not feasible to excavate a trench because it is not safe. Okay. So after excavating a trench, if you can expose the bedrock surface, or if you can expose the rock, then you have to log the trench. That means you have to record the different lithologies encountered in the trench. And after doing the logging, you have to put one channel at the base of the trench for the collection of the sample. Okay. Likewise, the way you are collecting the channel sample, in the same manner, after excavating the trench, at the base of the trench, you have to collect the channel sample for the analysis, and definitely you will get the continuous chemical analytical value, and with the help of the continuous analytical value, you can prepare on geochemical profile to know the variation of the particular element along the trench. Okay. This is a trench sample. Then this is the trenching activities going on. See how the trenching is done. Suppose in this part your exposure is not there, so trench outline has been defined by the chalk or limestone limey material. Then it is being excavated. After excavation, geologists will do the necessary geological work, that means the logging of the trench. After completion of the logging of the trench, and at the base of the trench, we can collect the cannon sample for the chemical analysis. Okay. Now, after that, there is another type of sample which is called core sample. Generally, core sample will be collected after doing the subsurface exploration by drilling, because after doing drilling, you will get the core, and the core will be kept in core boxes, and after completion of the borehole, each and every core box you have to see, and from 0 meter to up to the depth at which your borehole has been drilled, you have to systematically record the whatever the different lithologies and mineralization encountered in the borehole. Then you have to define the mineralized zone, and in that mineralized part only you have to collect the core sample. Okay, so sample interval, generally core sample interval depend upon for different commodities different. If we talk about the industrial minerals, the generally 1 meter sample is generally collected for limestone and phosphorite, and for other metallic deposits, sometimes sample length may be 0.5 meter or 0.25 meter also. But for industrial minerals such as limestone, coal, or phosphorite, the sample length will be 1 meter. Okay, so the core, after selecting the samples, after selecting the number of samples from the core, then we have to cut the core into two halves. One half will be kept in the core boxes for future references, and other half is being powdered and sent to chemical laboratory for the chemical analysis. Okay, so this core sample will be only collected after doing the subsurface exploration by drilling. Okay, so this is a simple photograph of cores. You can see this arrow marks is shown in this on the core surface to show you the direction of the drilling. So in this direction of the core, direction of the arrow is showing you the direction of the drilling. Okay, see, these are the photographs of cores kept in the core boxes, and this is the photograph where 3 persons is sitting together to do the core logging. Because whatever the drilling has been done from 0 meter to up to the depth up to which the drilling has been done, you have to systematically record the different lithology, that is called core logging. And core, after doing the core logging only, we can collect the core sample. So after collection of the, after defining the sample length in the core boxes, then we have to cut. For cutting purpose, we can use this core cutter, or either, or you can use this core splitter. Yes, anyone saying anything? Okay, so for splitting purpose, we can use these two instruments. One is called core cutter and is called core splitter. Now you can see the core cutter. Core cutter has a core blade. Okay, it has a blade, and this core cutter is used generally with the help of some water, and this core, but for this core splitter, we don't want anything. Simply we have to put our core in between those two parallel blades, and we have to use one hammer to cut the cores into two pieces. Okay, so definitely one piece will be kept in the core box, and other piece will be processed for the chemical analysis. Okay. Then there is another type of sample, as I told you, bulk sample. I already told you that for the beneficiation purpose, the bulk sample is being collected, and there are two types of beneficiation studies there. One is called laboratory scale beneficiation study, other is called plant scale beneficiation study. For laboratory scale beneficiation study, you have to collect 100 kg to 50 kg of sample, but in case of plant scale or pilot scale beneficiation study, we have to collect thousands kg, and sometimes up to 50 tons of samples need to be collected. Okay, and these samples are processed and analyzed, and the extraction techniques will be defined. Because definitely, if you do any exploration and define some deposit, that from that deposit your particular metals or commodity should be extracted. If you cannot extract, then there is no use. That's why for further detailed exploration stage, after going to the G1 stage or G2 stage, this verification study need to be completed. Okay. Now coming to the sample preparation. How we prepare our sample? It's a very simple method is there. I show you diagrammatically. Suppose for bedrock sample, we have collected 1.5 kg or 2 kg of sample. Now we have to reduce the sample because 1 kg or 2 kg sample cannot be submitted to chemical laboratory for analysis. We have to again collect one representative part from
how the mountains are built, how the oceans are created, how the rivers are created. Mostly we think they have been created by some god at the same time. But
can you speak a bit louder? Your voice is not so clear. Can you speak louder? Yes, please. Mr. Devi, can you speak a bit louder? Are you asking any question? सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. See, sometimes. Okay. So this diagram is for coning and quartering technique. This coning and quartering technique is used to reduce the sample quantity and to collect one representative part for the chemical analysis. Because as I told you, in case of bedrock sample, challenge sample, or grid bedrock sample, 2 kg or 1.5 kg of sample will be collected. That whole 1.5 kg or 2 kg sample cannot be submitted to chemical laboratory for analysis. Okay, you have to collect one representative part. So for collection of a representative part, this coning and quartering method need to be applied a number of times and we'll get one representative part. So for the purpose, we have to pour the powdered sample in on a surface and it will make a cone. Okay. Then that cone need to be flattened and the flattened cone will looks like this, like my fourth diagram. And with the help of one scale, we have to make it 4 equal parts. Okay, so diagonally 2 equal parts will be rejected and 2 equal parts will be taken for sample. And this process will be repeatedly applied for getting the representative one. So this is the process for collection of the final representative sample for chemical laboratory. Okay. So this is a actual photograph, how we do it. And finally, this is the packet we prepare to send the sample to chemical laboratory. And there are other samples are being collected, petrological samples are being collected for petrological studies. Okay. Then ore microscopic sample will be collected for studying the ores under the microscope. Definitely these ores are being studied under reflected light and the minerals are being studied under transmitted light. Okay. Then some isotopic samples are also being collected. I am not going into detail. Okay. And then fluid inclusion study. See, these are the photographs. In your sample, sometimes the inclusion will looks like this. And most of the cases, these fluid inclusion samples are being collected from the secondary quartz and calcite veins or some secondary veins, because those are the locales where the chance of arresting the fluids are more. Okay, or chance of trapping the fluids are more. And those samples are being collected and some thin wafers will be prepared and then thin wafers will be sent to fluid inclusion laboratory for the study. Now, for exploration of limestone and phosphorite, generally limestone is simply containing of calcium oxide and it will look like some off-white to white color. So if it is exposed on the surface, we can easily identify it. For limestone, it is no problem. But phosphorite, it is a problem. Whether your rock sample is containing any phosphorite or not, you cannot understand that only by seeing it with your eye. So there is a field test for phosphorite, which is called Sapiro solution test. By this test, you can confirm that whether your sample is containing any rock phosphate or P2O5 or not. Okay. So for the phosphorite exploration, we use this Sapiro solution test. Generally, This, in case of this Sapiro solution, we know we determine P2O5 content in sample, and it is totally a visual estimation technique. Okay, generally it is a rapid and simple technique and moderately accurate method under field condition. Okay, then suppose a three-man team can, if a three-man team can analyze 120 to 150 sample daily, compared with only 10 samples maybe analyzed with gravimetric or pyrophosphatic method. Okay, so that is rapid method. That's why we can analyze a number of samples with this technique. But the visual Sapiro solution technique, the result between this visual Sapiro solution test technique and the laboratory technique, there is not much difference. Only 1 to 2% difference might be there, or deviation might be there. But for quick access or quickly assess the possibility of an area, this method is very useful. Okay. Now, how this Sapiro solution, there's a solution, this is called Sapiro solution. How this Sapiro solution is being prepared. So for the preparation of Sapiro solution, there is two scientists was there who devised this method. One is Sapiro, another is Brennock. They devised a method for ascertaining the approximate P2O5 content in the samples. Okay. Generally, two solutions are generally prepared and mixed to make the Sapiro solution. Solution one is in solution 1, 0.3 gram of ammonium metabentate, and metabentate will be taken, and within which 200 ml of distilled water is mixed. Okay, and 50 ml of concentrated nitric acid will be mixed. This is a solution 1. This solution 1 will be prepared. Then there will be a solution 2, in which 12.5 gram of ammonium molybdate will be taken, and it will be mixed with 100 ml of distilled water and 25 ml of NH3. This solution, these two solutions will be mixed together to form the Sapiro solution. Generally, solution number 2 is gently mixed with solution number 1, and it will be added slowly distilled water to make it 500 ml. Okay, so now the solution is ready for the field test of P2O5. So this solution is known as Sapiro solution. This is a very important solution for the phosphorus investigation. Now, how it is used? Before using, we have to take the few grams of samples from the rock, and that samples have to be powdered by using the mortar and pestle, and finely powdered samples will be taken. Generally, 1 scoop of taken, and around 6 gram of sample will be taken, and that 6 gram of sample will be mixed with the Sapiro solution. Now, some test tube will be taken, some 25 centimeter length with a capping. It is that such type of test tube will be taken. In that test tube, 10 ml of Sapiro solution will be poured first. Okay, so after pouring 10 ml of Sapiro solution in test tube, 6 gram of that powdered sample will be mixed with that. Okay, the sample will react with the solution, and one complex which is called molybdophosphoric acid will form. The color of this complex, that is molybdophosphoric acid, is yellow. By seeing the intensity of the yellow color, we can visually give the concentration of P2O5 present in the sample. So now it's easier to judge the color intensity by looking along the length of the test tube and holding it over a white background. The intensity of yellow color is compared to the color of standard similarly prepared. Suppose before going to the field, by taking the known samples, you have to prepare one standard. Okay, after preparation of standard, you can test your field samples. Okay, then you have to match your field sample Sapiro solution color, yellow color, with the standard, and you can have an idea how much quantity of P2O5 is there in the sample. So finally, calculation of the phosphorus concentration is made visually with the help of working phosphorus solution. Now see this photograph. See this in this left-hand side test tube, the color intensity of yellow color is less than the intensity of yellow color in the right-hand side test tube. And in the middle one, you can easily understand that there is no P2O5 content. That means the sample is devoid of any phosphorite. But in the left-hand side and right-hand side test tube is showing that the sample is definitely they contain some phosphorite, because it is giving some yellow color. And this yellow color is the indication of presence of the P2O5 in the samples. Again, you see the intensity, how the intensity, see in the right hand side test tube intensity is very low. Some ppm the level of P2O5 might be there. But in case of right hand side, left hand side test tube, you can see the intensity of yellow color is more compared to the yellow color in the right hand side. So definitely some amount of P2O5 is there in the sample. So this is a in-field test done by me and some of the trainees. Okay, so that is all about this presentation. Okay, now see, I have shown you 4 test tubes. Extreme right test tube, there is no P2O5 content. Now see, in this maybe 1% is there, in this test tube also 1.2 or 1.1% is there, and in this test tube also 1.2 or 1% is there. So there is not much variation because the intensity yellow intensity of yellow color is not differ from each other. Okay, so likewise, this is a very simple test in field we generally carry out while we do the phosphorus exploration in the field. Okay, so in chemical lab, quantitative analysis of the phosphoric rock samples are done by XRF method. Whenever you submit powdered sample to lab, they will do it by XRF method and they will get the P2O5 content. So generally the lowest detection limit of P2O5 by this XRF method is 100 ppm. Okay, so these are some of the this is a table which is showing the analytical package and their lower detection limits. Okay, XRF, in the XRF method we can analyze these major oxides, and these are the different elements we can analyze by this XRF method. Then B package is the AS method. Gold is generally analyzed and lower detection limit is 3 ppb. Then this FAS method is lithium and cesium is analyzed. Then HGAS method, arsenic, then antimony and bismuth is analyzed. Then ISC method, fluorine is analyzed. GFAS, cadmium and silver will be analyzed. Then CBAS, mercury will be analyzed. Then ICP-MS method is there. These are the different analytical methods and their lower detection limits that will be done by chemical laboratories. Okay, so that is all about this presentation. Now, if you have any queries, you can ask. Yes. So, yes, please. If you have any queries regarding this, you can ask.